Hi, everyone. I am Danae. I am a co-founder and a CEO of a company that helps people deal with workplace nightmares. So today I'm going to tell you about how to protect yourself when things can turn into a nightmare at work or when you think they are turning into a nightmare. So this is me. If you have any questions, you can always email me and I'll give you some more links soon. So what I'm going to talk you through is a quick mnemonic, a quick 5-step mnemonic to remember to protect yourself at work. So all you need to know is to remember to know your lines. So let's quickly talk through what those lines are. So I'm going to give you a little whistle-stop tour of these 5 sections. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this and about my company as we go through them, so you have a better idea of why these work and how to think about things. So first, I'm going to help you understand what your leverage is at work and why that's so important to identify first. Then I'm going to help you think about how to use your internal processes if things go wrong. Then I'm going to tell you about contemporaneous notes and why they are the secret weapon for it's my word against theirs. And then we're going to talk about keeping an evidence timeline and your support systems. And before I dive in, just a little bit of context here. I am not a lawyer and I'm not an employment lawyer. I'm just a woman who worked in tech. I was a software developer and then I was a marketer. And I got more senior as time went on and I became an executive. And I found with my friend Kate that we saw a lot of problems with people getting discriminated against at work, bullied, harassed, and things like that. And we got really mad that nobody was able to do anything about it. And so our company and our platform helps people deal with these issues themselves because frankly, nobody can afford a lawyer these days. So this is all about you being able to protect yourself, educating yourself enough that when something goes really badly wrong, you can deal with it before you have to pick up the phone to the next person. All right, so let's dive in. Let's understand your leverage, the L of lines. Now, when I think about leverage with an employer, typically you're thinking about 2 different kinds of leverage that you have. And your employer will think about this as 2 different types of risk. So they'll think about reputational risk to them, and then they'll think about legal risk to them. And now legal risk in particular, that's a big risk because legal risk is money. And that's tough. So if you think about what an employer is trying to do in any kind of conflict situation, is they're trying to reduce risk. And if you know that and can think about it that way, then you can actually help them understand how they can reduce the risk in their situation. And that is your leverage. So the key best leverage that you can use is your legal leverage. And that's down to knowing what your rights are. Now, a lot of people in the UK specifically think that they don't have any rights before 2 years. Now, that's not true. There are rights that don't kick in until after 2 years, like unfair and constructive dismissal. And those, frankly, should kick in before it's awful. But you do have a lot of rights, typically called day 1 rights, before 2 years, even during the hiring process, before you even start your job. And most of those are around discrimination, as well as things like whistleblowing. Now, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word discrimination, they think about, like a jerk calling someone a slur, or some really kind of like, overt mustache twirling villain kind of discrimination, which is discrimination. But there are actually 6 different types of discrimination here in the UK. And I just want to give you a little whistle-stop tour of those because I want you to understand that you might have a lot more rights than you think you have. So these are the 6 different types of discrimination that you have a legal right to in the UK before you even start your job. So direct discrimination, that is the mustache twirling villain kind of discrimination. That is, I'm going to discriminate against you because you have this protected characteristic, your race, your age, your gender, the disability you have, etc. So that's what we all kind of think of as discrimination. There are 5 other kinds. There's indirect discrimination, where a company, process, or a policy indirectly affects a whole group of people with one protected characteristic. So think of like terrible dress codes that make women have to wear skimpy clothes, but men don't. That's indirect discrimination. There's harassment. Harassment isn't just sexual harassment. People can see other people being discriminated against, and that can count as harassment. Anything that creates a degrading, humiliating environment that is related to a protected characteristic is harassment. There is so much more than we think that falls under that category. Victimization. You have the right to speak up at work about any kind of discrimination that you think is happening. And if you speak up about it, whether it's happening to you or to someone else, and then you are punished as a result of speaking up about it, that's illegal. That's called victimization. And then there are two specific types of discrimination that are related specifically for people who have disabilities. The discrimination arising from a disability is just a fancy way of saying you're not just protected because you have the disability, but you're also protected because that has knock-on effects in your life and they can't discriminate against you because of those knock-on effects. And then also there's a failure to make reasonable adjustments. If you have a disability in the UK, you have every right to ask your employer to make some reasonable adjustments for that disability at work. If they don't even engage with that process, they're at risk of that type of discrimination. Now, that is a little whistle-stop tour. There is so much more to it, but I just want to give you a flavor of the rights that you have that you might not even have known that you had. So that's legal leverage that you have that you might not have even known about. And when you then think about, well, how can I use legal leverage? Well, we're going to talk about that in the next section, but here's a really quick summary. So first, you would do an internal complaint. The biggest tool that an employer uses to reduce that risk, that legal risk especially, is a settlement agreement. That's a very common way of them getting that risk off the table. And then it's only after those two things happen that you would even need to kind of go legal with that legal leverage. So you have options to protect yourself. All right, so let's look at the I in lines, learning to use internal processes. So when I say internal processes, this is the kind of stuff I mean. What is your sickness and absence policy? What is your grievance and disciplinary process? All employers in the UK have to have a grievance and disciplinary process or use the ACAS code of practice. There are all kinds of different policies that different employers will have. And it's super important to check your company handbook and look at those things if they think, if you think that they could be relating to a situation that you're in. And the reason that's important is if you follow the process and expect your employer to also follow the process, you're signaling a few different things. The first thing is that you're signaling to your employer is, don't mess me about. I know what I'm doing here. Please take me seriously. And that's super valuable when you're dealing with some kind of a conflict. It also means that if you were to have to get legal later on, the tribunal or a court would be expecting you to show that you had tried to resolve it internally. And so following it means that you're building a strong case. And it helps you actually resolve your issue. Many people manage to solve their issues long before they have to get anywhere past just an internal process. So that's I. Now let's talk about contemporaneous notes. So this is the secret weapon against the big question I get asked, particularly about discrimination. It's his word against mine. It's her word against mine. How do I prove it? I don't have any hard evidence. Well, the answer is contemporaneous notes. So contemporaneous just means notes that are taken as soon as possible after an event or action takes place. Now, why are these so valuable? Well, courts and tribunals, they understand that solid evidence is hard to get. Not everybody's walking around with like live vlogging. There's not CCTV everywhere. And so they know that hard evidence isn't always possible, but contemporaneous notes, they are the next best thing. And that's because contemporaneous is important because tribunals know that memory can change over time. And so if you can show that as soon as that thing happened or as soon after as possible, you wrote down to the best of your fresh recollection what that happened, they will take that much more seriously than something written 2, 3, 5, 6 months later. So how do you do this? You just write down what happened, who was there, what was said, as soon as you possibly can after the thing that happened. And record those notes in something that has a built-in timestamp. Now, we have this for free on the Valid platform. A lot of the Valid platform is completely free for things like this. Or you could just, email yourself. That's a really cheap way. Just make sure that you do not do it from your work system. if you do it from your work system, make sure you take a copy, because they can switch off your access and you lose your notes. And the other way to do it is, send a follow-up email to everybody and say, hey, we just had this chat. Here's a quick summary of who said what. So you can be professional and documenting at the same time. All right, so we've got two more. The last two is E and S. So let's talk about keeping an evidence timeline to protect yourself at work. So what do I mean when I say an evidence timeline? So really, it's just a chronology. It's just a list of things that happened and when. It's basically taking those contemporaneous notes plus any evidence of things that happened and putting them together in a timeline. And so here's an example of a evidence timeline in Vala. It's just vala.uk if you want to build one of these. You can do this for free as well. And you can see here that those notes, those contemporaneous notes, you can just paste in. And you can also attach any documents that are relevant to that particular case. I spoke to someone just the other day who was asked to put products out on the shelves that were past their sell-by date and had been put, new dates had been put over the top. They took a lot of photos. That is evidence, and that would be something that you would put into your evidence timeline. So that's what an evidence timeline is. It's also super easy. If you do use Vala, everybody gets a special email address where you can just forward everything in, and then it automatically uploads it, because it's hard to keep track of all of these things, especially if you've got photos on your phone. And why is this important? Well, like the person who is being asked to put those products on the shelves, you'll have the receipts. You need to know that you have some proof if someone tries to lie. And I am very sorry to say, I help people deal with their employers every single day. Some employers do lie. And so the more receipts you can have, the better. It also means that having that timeline laid out means that when you use the internal processes, your life is going to be so much easier. So the first thing that you will do if you raise a grievance is they'll say, okay, what happened and when? And if you've already got your timeline, you can say, okay, no problem, here you go. And then you pass that over. And again, showing your employer that you know what's up, that you're preparing a good case, that they need to take you seriously and get this issue resolved. And finally, it'll save you money. So if you do have to get legal later on, if you've got all of this information organized in a nice timeline with contemporaneous notes, if you need to get a lawyer to review your case, then sharing all of that with them is going to save you money, because it means that the lawyer needs less time to actually review what's going on. So it's a good idea to protect yourself, to keep things just in a quick timeline. All right. Final bit, let's talk about your support systems. Now, it's really useful to think about, who am I going to call if everything starts to go wrong now? Even if you only think about it just within the 2 minutes that we talk about it here, it's going to help. So when I talk about support systems, I mean not just your friends and family, but who could you call? What could you actually do if something like this happened? What options are out there and available to you? So we're talking about pro bono centers, advice organizations, things like that. So it's very useful. People kind of often forget about friends and family aren't just useful to moan to, because they are very useful for that. But also having someone come with you to some of these meetings, especially those internal meetings around grievances and things like that, just ask them to take notes. Having someone else taking notes for you is such a great thing to do. You're often very stressed in these situations. You're not quite sure what you said that you would do and everything else. Get them to take the notes for you. Really helps. Advice organizations, you'll know about ACAS. There's also Citizens Advice. And then there are usually specific charities related to the problem that you have. For example, maternity discrimination, Call Pregnant Then Screwed. They are amazing. And then if you live near a university, there's typically a great law clinic there with free advice that can help you. And never be afraid to email the local law firms that are around you, kind of medium-sized law firms. They never use all of their pro bono time that they're supposed to use. They're always looking for a good excuse to do pro bono stuff so that they can tick that box. Never be shy about asking. And then finally, if you have a union, my goodness, use your union. If you have an employee assistance program that gives you free legal support and psychological support, so valuable. So valuable. And just remember, HR is that They are the personification of that machine that is trying to reduce reputational and legal risk. Help them do that. Help them do that by reaching a settlement. Okay, that is me. Just a quick reminder to know your lines when things become a nightmare. And also, you have more power than you think, and I am cheering you on. And if you ever want to talk, I am on TikTok at vala.uk and happy to answer questions there as well as right now.